The long-shrouded mystery surrounding the assassination of President John F. Kennedy continues to unravel as the U.S. government releases a new trove of previously classified files. Decades after that fateful day in Dallas, the public remains captivated by questions of who was truly behind the killing and whether key information was deliberately withheld. With each new document, the potential for clarity grows. Yet so too does the intrigue as fresh revelations challenge long-held narratives and deepen suspicions about the roles of intelligence agencies, foreign actors, and possible conspiracies. This release marks not just a pivotal moment in American historical transparency, but a renewed reckoning with one of the nation's most haunting political tragedies.
Welcome to the Retrospect podcast, a show where people come together from different walks of life and discuss a topic from their generation's perspective. My name is Ian, and as always, I'm joined by Stoney.
Hello.
And Jason.
Hello, everyone.
How's it going?
It's been good.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get adjusted to my new job and trying to get back into that.
Hey, wasn't you retired?
I was retired.
I thought you retired.
I retired, and lo and behold, yes,
They just can't get enough of you.
I am back in the workplace. So yes, I'm having to actually get up and move in the morning a lot faster. And sometimes I get to work, I say, God, I would still be sitting on the recliner about this time right now.
Yeah.
But yes, I'm little by little getting back into that swing of things again, and it keeps you on your toes, keeps the mind fresh, and gives you a purpose. And not that I didn't enjoy my time off, because I felt like I needed some time off.
And you said it was about a year?
A little over a year.
Hey, take a little year off.
Take a year off. Well, I'm going to tell you what, I'm a firm believer. I think if people could do that, I think people would work a lot longer to be able to kind of get their mind rested and, kind of recharge the battery, so to speak.
I think it would help out a lot of people from burning out.
Well, that's what generally drives people
in Europe,
to retirement.
people take a 30-day holiday every year.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
that's crazy.
We could do that in America. That wouldn't be bad.
Yeah, the culture here, it's all about, how hard you work. And, man, I put in, 50 hours this week or 60 hours or whatever the case may be. And it's sort of like a badge of honor. Which, but neither here nor there. Hey, that might be a good podcast episode.
Maybe.
Right?
Yeah. Burnout in the office.
Right.
Solutions.
I feel like we do have to talk about this a little bit. The last week's episode dropped the Monday after Easter, and then Pope Francis passed away, which is kind of a crazy turn of events.
Yeah, he had been having some health issues, and
we had just done the episode.
And that's what I was going to say. I was going to say next. I was like, "What? I'm not saying that we had any insight. We didn't plan anything. We didn't know nothing."
I think people knew that it was, He was getting close.
His health was bad.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he was getting close to making that transition to the next life, and we all pray for the repose of his soul, and pray for the new conclave that will be getting together, and we'll see who the next pope will be. But it'd be interesting to watch.
I hope that everyone can come to terms and can be on the same page moving forward.
Yes, that'd be great.
But for today, though,
we're going to talk about the stuff that President Trump had promised.
Yeah.
Executive order.
Yeah.
14176 of 2025. In January 2025, President Donald Trump signed the executive order 14,176 mandating the classification of remaining records related to the assassinations of JFK, Robert F. Kennedy, and Martin Luther King. Subsequently, over 63,000 pages of documents were released, providing new insights.
That's a lot. a lot of paperwork, and I've heard that a majority of some of those pages are just like, "Hey, I did that thing. Thank you," and that's about it. But I think from what I've seen is that it's literally anything having to do with anybody that has ever been around that sort of thing, which is why it's so many documents.
Yeah.
Well, before this, we only had really two situations: the Warren Commission and the House Select Committee on Assassinations in '79.
Yep.
And basically, the Warren Commission said that Oswald acted alone in assassinating President Kennedy. He fired 3 shots from the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository, and Jack Ruby acted alone in killing Oswald 2 days later. Then in '79, HSCA said that Kennedy was probably assassinated as a result of a conspiracy. Acoustical evidence suggested the possibility of a second gunman, but no specific individuals or groups could be conclusively identified as part of the conspiracy. Now, y'all have known me. You've known me for a long time. Jason and I have known each other for, I guess, 6 years now?
Yeah.
Man? What have I said about JFK?
Mm-hmm.
And everybody looks at me.
The mob was involved.
And everybody looks at me like I was crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, CIA embarrassed JFK for the 3rd time with the Bay of Pigs, and he said he was going to close them up. I think there was I wish I could find the statement. He gave a very specific statement on the CIA. Man, I wish I could remember what. I will splinter the CIA into 1,000 pieces and scatter it to the winds.
Ooh, that's a quote right there.
Okay. That's after the Bay of Pigs. JFK fired CIA Director Alan Dulles, along with some other senior officials. Bissell was one, and I can't remember the name of the other guy. But and still today, the CIA cannot operate inside the confines of the United States. So what's the line?
I think that may have changed though with the Patriot Act.
I don't think the CIA can still do that.
It
falls under. They can collaborate,
right?
But up
I
until
think that door was open though with the Patriot Act.
Until that time, when they wanted something done inside the United States, who was doing the work for them? Carlos Marcellus. The crime family, the mafioso crime family out of New Orleans. And they were making estimated 50 to 65% of their income was coming from the CIA. When they needed something done, wet work, troubleshooting,
right?
Whatever they needed done, they were doing it for the CIA.
Well,
so when JFK said, "I'm going to shut y'all down," the CIA calls up Carlos Marcellus and says, "Hey, you're going to lose about half your income unless you do something about this."
Yeah.
So what did these new documents say?
Well, it's a lot of things.
Well, as of right now, with the release of those documents, with already the documents that were probably available, I think according to the U.S. National Archives, you have 63,000 documents can now be viewed with this new edition. So that's a lot.
Yeah.
I do know that when they released them that there was some redaction, not much, because I know when President Trump did this, he says, "I want them released without redaction," even though there was
he did
some,
say that. Yes,
there is some redaction because, these. I think why these things have been classified for so long, it just gives insights of how our intelligence agencies work in this country, and we have talked about it that this was the fear of Dwight Eisenhower. And part of the whole military-industrial complex, that he had literally lost control by the end of his presidency, that they had pretty much assumed a role that is beyond the scope of of the purview of the electorate. We talk about all this time about how the Pentagon can't pass an audit. There's so much money that's missing. I guarantee you a lot of this money can't be tracked because it goes in black projects, and it's so buried so deep in so many different things. It's just crazy. So I think this is just this was the beginnings of this eventual monstrosity that we have today. And really probably goes back to World War II,
right?
If you really want to be honest about it. Yeah.
Well, a couple of the main things that has come out on this was the CIA was surveilling Oswald when he went to Cuba and the Soviet Union and their embassies in Mexico. So they were watching him.
Yeah,
they kind of already knew. And so they had internal discussions about him as a potential threat for something or something else.
He talked about assassinating Kennedy in Mexico.
Yeah.
I mean, so they have that, which, them knowing that is a bit damning to them, because if you've got a guy that's now made credible threats, I'm going to kill the president, and you're not doing anything to this guy, okay, now you have to kind of opens up the door of going, well, why did they let this guy just kind of roam around like the way he did?
Right.
Or was it intentional?
Well,
did they go ahead and spin him over to their side and say,
I think that's where I think the fear of releasing some of this, because it does give the impression that okay, the CIA knows about this guy and they didn't do anything, and so this kind of reminds me of some of these school shooters that have come out afterwards. Well, the FBI knew about him and didn't do anything with him.
Or how about the two attempts on Donald Trump?
Exactly.
Where the Secret Service just failed miserably, or were they part of it?
I think when people see this, it kind of undermines faith in these institutions, and God forbid, we want to protect institutions, right? I mean, because as a democracy, and as our country is built upon institutions that are reliable, that can deliver what they plan on, delivering,
right?
And ultimately the system works. Well, in this case, it's beginning to show that, well, maybe the system is not working the way it's supposed to work, or at least in the minds of the American electorate.
Right.
And I think that's the fear with some of this. And
it's brought out so much. Sorry, I thought you were taking a breath there, but just the testimonies and photographic evidence of the autopsies, it's casting a lot of shade on the completeness and the accuracy of the autopsy. How much of that was fudged to spin this one shooter thing, and now it looks like it was two shooters?
Yeah.
I mean,
I think there's.
So how many people were involved in this cover-up?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I mean, we talk about this topic, and it. I don't think the release is going to satisfy the itch that I think many people were expecting from this, and I believe Trump kind of even mentioned this when this topic came up. I mean, he has said that I don't think it's going to be what people think it is. It's going to be, and I think that's why I think a lot of people have not bothered about declassifying it, because it's not going to, okay, you declassify, you get all this, it raises even more questions. So what do you do now?
Well, it didn't do a couple things. They didn't cover the full extent of Oswald's connections with foreign entities. Okay, it didn't cover that at all. It did not cover the possibility of additional individuals or groups being involved in the assassination. And it didn't really bring to light the reasons behind certain redactions and withheld information in the released documents.
Right.
So there's still so many questions. I mean, but we got a lot of info now.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I kind of found some of those documents online. You have to be very careful because a lot of people like to put out a lot of bullshit too. So you got to be very careful.
Yep.
But there's still a lot of questions, but
Right.
it does give us a lot of information now to kind of go through and look at.
Well, you know, I found it. I find it interesting here. I looked at what were JFK's last words.
Really?
Yeah, it says Nellie Connolly, who is the Governor Connolly, who was in the car with President Kennedy, said Nellie Connolly turned and commented to Kennedy, who is sitting behind her, "Mr. President, they can't make you believe now that there are not some in Dallas who love and appreciate you, can they?"
Oh, my gosh.
Kennedy's reply, "No, they sure can't," before he got shot.
Get out.
Mhm.
Wow, that's hard.
Well, you know, there was a lot of people who were, I mean, there were a lot of people, I mean, at that time, there were a lot of people who didn't like Lyndon Johnson. I mean, there was still a lot of animosity between the northern part of the country and the southern part of the country. I mean, I would venture to say that still remnants of the Civil War were still very much ingrained within people, because you're within 100 years of the surrender at Appomattox, and I do believe that there was some things that, you know, we're going down to kind of this area, and there was some kind of bit of a hostility there with some of Kennedy's people. You know, Kennedy was from the Northeast. He picked Lyndon Johnson because he needed to consolidate the Southern vote.
Yeah.
I forget how each state voted. And you actually can probably look it up who voted for who. I'll be very curious. I think Louisiana voted for John F. Kennedy in that election, which would have been in 1960 or 1961. It had to be 60 or 50, 59, 60, somewhere up in there. I think it might have been 1960.
1960.
Yeah.
It says
How
that
did the
Louisiana was for John F. Kennedy.
John F. Kennedy, that's what I thought.
Texas was as well.
Yeah, because of Lyndon Johnson.
Yeah. A lot of it looks like there's a lot of the kind of eastern side did John F. Kennedy, whereas a lot of the western side, except for Nevada, was for Richard Nixon.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's I mean,
but you got to wonder. I mean, you know, the day before.
I'm sorry, before you continue. One thing that's interesting, the popular vote, 34 million for both candidates. The only discrepancy is that John F. Kennedy won by 100,000 more votes.
It was a close election.
Yeah, percentage.
That's crazy.
Towards John F. Kennedy was 49.72, and Richard Nixon was 49.55. So skimming by. Sorry,
but no, that's cool. Yeah. No, that's great information, because I don't remember that one. That's interesting here. But some of the things that the documents have shown us is that the FBI was actually warned the day before Jack Ruby killed Oswald, and so they let it happen. Did they let it happen? You know, they were warned that someone's going to kill him, yet he remained unprotected. But it also shows how many deeper ties to organized crime that Jack Ruby had than previously known.
Yeah.
And U.S. intelligence.
Yep.
Wait, could he have been a middleman between something?
Well, maybe so. I'm looking at an article here from the Center for Politics .org. It's a nice website here. It has 10 findings from the newly released JFK assassination records. I said they got 10 of them here, but I'm just going to read one of them here. It's a wide-scale monitoring of U.S. mail and mail tampering by the CIA. A CIA document dated January 22nd, 1958, noted that CIA counterintelligence chief James Angleton reports that 200 or 300 CIA employees were exclusively engaged in monitoring U.S. mail going to the Soviet Union, indexing the names of approximately 250,000 names by CIA. The CIA built a laboratory in New York in connection with this project to examine correspondence for secret writing, microdots, and possibly codes. By March 1961, CIA advised that about 500,000 items per month passed to and from the USSR, and about 200 of these items are screened, and that approximately 1,200 items per month received close scrutiny.
Mm.
So they did monitor Oswald's mail.
Yeah.
So, because a letter was sent by his mother to him in the Soviet Union when he defected.
Yeah. Wow, that's wild.
Yeah, it said a separate memo from 1975 document shows the CIA mailing of black letters primarily from third countries and a mail intercept operation which would enable one to two fabricate the paper envelopes, writing and addressing styles, even counterfeit postage stamps and cachets, all with the aim of giving the appearance that the letter originated from North Vietnam,
Wow.
Peking, Beijing, and other location.
Well, you said something earlier, and I think the Patriot Act stopped something that these documents show, that the CIA, FBI, Secret Service all withheld information from each other. And
Yes.
they intentionally did that.
They siloed it.
They siloed it, yes. They missed the warning signs, and the lingering mistrust muddled future investigations. And I think what the Patriot Act did was force them to come together in a way, or give them opportunities to work together. But I don't think the CIA still works inside the continental United States, or whatever that, there's a line in the ocean or whatever. Excuse my brain now. I can't remember what the hell the line is, but they can't operate inside that. But now they have to come together and work together. And I think that's what the Patriot Act did, so that things like this weren't supposed to happen again.
Mm.
Yeah, here it is. I mean, Stoney, you mentioned this earlier about the Bay of Pigs. It's one of these findings. It basically, it's the White House was critical of the CIA after the Bay of Pigs. Kennedy's aide Arthur Schlesinger wrote a highly critical memo to JFK on June 10th, 1961, taking the CIA to task for undermining the State Department. Clandestine intelligence collection exposes American foreign policy to a multitude of embarrassments when CIA is discovered recruiting agents or developing sources in a friendly country, as in Singapore, Japan, and Pakistan. The CIA admitted that in such cases, neither the embassy nor the State Department in Washington is normally informed of this type of operation. Yeah, they said prior to the Bay of Pigs invasion, the CIA had given Kennedy assurances that sending CIA-trained Cuban exiles into Cuba to overthrow Castro could not fail.
Oh, it did.
Trusting that their intelligence was accurate, he gave the go-ahead for the invasion, only to have the exiles quickly defeated by Castro's forces.
Wow.
So, yeah. This is I'm telling you, I am looking at some of this stuff. I mean, it's I mean, it's absolutely, just some of this stuff is just, and you know what? It's still going on, probably.
100%. That's crazy.
Well, the House Select Committee in 79 acknowledged credible associations between Marcellus, Oswald, and Jack Ruby, suggesting that he had the motive, means, and opportunity to have a president assassinated. And I think one of the reasons that they didn't want all this information out was so that the American public would not think that the mafia could take out a sitting president. It was kind of unable to establish direct evidence of with his complicity. But Arthur Lamar Waldron claimed that Marcello's admitted his involvement to fellow inmates during a fit of rage in prison, stating that he had masterminded the assassination while planting red herrings to confuse the press and embarrass the FBI and CIA into suppressing evidence. So he's walking around telling people this.
Yeah.
He's not hiding it. So why is it taking this long for it to kind of come out other than, it's conspiracy theory stuff?
Right.
I mean, here in 1964, CIA Inspector General report detailed the workings of the CIA station in Mexico City and how the CIA organized its operations on the ground, including a principal agent who was a Catholic priest. The station is organized into the Soviet branch, Cuban branch, satellite branch, covert action branch, Communist Party branch, and an operational catch-all, which is called the Operational Support Branch. The station has a highly successful project directed at the rural end of peasant targets. The principal agent is a Catholic priest. The project shows promise of expanding into Guatemala, where the Archbishop of Guatemala has asked for assistance and training to set up a similar organization. Oswald traveled to Mexico City on September 27, 1963, and stayed until October 2nd, 1963, less than 2 months before Kennedy's assassination, hoping to get a visa to go to Cuba. Unfortunately, little is known of his day-to-day activities there except for visiting the Cuban and Soviet embassies, where he met with a KGB officer. We hope that some of the remaining documents will provide a clearer picture of his time there. There's so much going on.
Right.
Well, you have to think about this also. When Cuba fell, that's where the mafia was.
Yeah.
Yeah, they
all
were
their
in
hotels
Havana.
there, and so the CIA actually had contacted Sam Giancana, Johnny Rosselli, and Santo Trafficante, and they were supposed to come in and assassinate Fidel Castro. So the CIA had been already working with the mafia. This isn't something that's not known.
Right.
This is like everywhere. The evidence of this merger between two organizations, so to speak, because Castro had shut down their casinos and hotels and drug routes.
Right.
It was crazy. It just, wow. It's just,
yeah.
Yeah, I mean as I said, I think the fear here is, people are going to be just catching on to some of these of what the CIA actually does, and I just think the CIA doesn't want any sort of light on any of their operations. Nope. Of how they gather clandestine information from other countries. As I said, the biggest thing is I think the biggest news here is the CIA was monitoring Oswald. They knew he had made threats against the president. He was actively involved in foreign governments with Soviet Union, with Cuba, with these communist regimes.
Mm-hmm.
And they all had reasons to get rid of Kennedy. And especially if Kennedy was going to shut down their operation. So I think the biggest takeaways from at least what I've been able to see is, is how well the CIA knew of Lee Harvey Oswald, and knowing that he made these threats, and it appears that they didn't do anything about it. Now, whether they thought they would just let it ride and maybe try to get more information and didn't think he would actually try to assassinate Kennedy, I don't know. I think the idea that just this one guy was able to get up there and do what he did, I just think there's probably more there to it. Will we know? Because as we said, there are some redactions.
Mm-hmm.
I imagine because of some people probably are still alive.
Right.
And, you know, as I said, I mean, George Bush Sr. was the head of the CIA. I'm sure he was fully aware of what was going on, at that time, but or was made aware of it later on, of course after the fact. But you still got George Bush Jr. Still alive, and I'm sure he doesn't. I'm sure it doesn't want to be in have family that possibly could have been involved or some way. Not to say that he was, but I'm just saying it's the name is still floating around, and so yeah, I do think it'll be somewhat of an embarrassment on some of this stuff. And
I think too, some of it, not only is it like the immediate family of some of those people or their addresses. I think I've heard potentially some of those things were redacted for personal reasons because they may still live in the same area, and you don't want people, showing up at people's houses.
Yeah, I mean, look, I mean, we all know. I mean, there's stuff that's going on behind the scenes. Like, I mean, I mean, kind of on an unrelated matter, but I mean, finally they made public the new Blackbird. They find, he exists. Here it is. The SR-72. It's supposedly the successor to
the U-2.
Yeah, that whatever the one they developed back in the 60s.
Mm-hmm. Well, that was one of the three incidences that embarrassed JFK. The 1959 Laos policy failure, the U-2 being shot down in 60. What was his Francis Gary Powers was the pilot, and then the Bay of Pigs in 61. Those were the three things happening pretty quickly by the CIA that embarrassed JFK.
Yeah.
And his distrust of the agency deepened with each one of them. And the Bay of Pigs was just the final straw.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I just think that, I think the U.S. government, just like we said, whether, they kept this information to themselves for a reason, or they just may have simply been because of incompetence.
Yeah.
And incompetence and laziness that, maybe once this guy's been threatened, that you think maybe security would have been heightened, maybe would not have allowed Kennedy. If that information was relayed to the Secret Service, they may not have gone to Dallas, or they may have done something different.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But as I said, I don't think it completely scratches the itch that's there. I think you still have an itch, and
well, it's all these organizations thinking they're king. The Secret Service thinking they're king. The CIA thinking they're king. The FBI thinking they're king. Had they actually come together, this could have been totally different. Had they been sharing information and been actually working together, this would have been really different.
Correct.
And doing what's really best for the American people instead of the, military industrial complex, which is what all of this is. You remember at the time, JFK wanted to, come out of Vietnam. He wanted to do some stuff with, bringing the nuclear Holocaust down.
Right.
Well, I'm looking at an AP article dated March 24, 2025, and it's still They say before Tuesday, researchers had estimated that 3,000 to 3,500 files were still unreleased, either wholly or partially. Last month, the FBI said it had discovered about 2,400 new records related to the assassination. So,
well, they got these things buried
in file cabinets, and in this office and in that office, and who knows what's all out there. And maybe that was done by design. We'll spread a little information here. We'll spread a little information there. Just kind of diffuse it around the country and trying to piece it together almost next to impossible.
Right.
Because, it's like anything, get stuff in a file cabinet, sits there for years and decades, and people forget what's all this stuff in here, and they stick it in a closet somewhere, and people forget about it because life goes on.
Yeah.
But there has been some criticism of this release. In a post on X, Schlossberg said the Trump administration did not notify family members before records were made public.
Okay. And?
Okay.
I don't give a shit.
Oh.
Yeah.
So what? He said we're going to declassify the files. You know if your family was involved in that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Yep.
Somebody's feelings are hurt. Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just think it gives more clarification on intelligence operations during the Cold War and things leading up to Kennedy's death, and I think that's the biggest thing. And the intelligence agencies got their fingers in everything, and
they're all hidden. That's the key. They like to do these things in the dark because they don't want you to know what they're really doing. That's why the Pentagon can't survive an audit. They don't want you to know where they're putting their money, what they're doing with it. But I've said for years, if you can afford to fight 2 wars, you're taxing your people too much.
Mm.
Well, it says a version of that memo released in 2023 redacted the name of the CIA security contact on Oswald in Mexico, as well as the identity of someone behind the penetration of the Cuban embassy there. The latest version shows that security contact was the president of Mexico in 1975, Luis Echeverria Alvarez, who died in 2022, and that the Mexican government itself penetrated the Cuban embassy.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, this is interesting. I mean, it's just, to me, for people who, I hate to put it this way, people who are prone to really believe in conspiracy theories, none of this really surprises people.
No.
I think people that kind of think along those lines basically look at this and go, you know what? Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, they're basically running the show, and they're controlling things from behind the scenes. And no wonder why nothing can get done. No wonder why the Pentagon can't pass an audit. No wonder why nobody seems to have the courage to bring things up, because they all have dirt on them.
That's right. But there's one more statistic that all of this proves. Right now, the conspiracy theorists are up 72-0.
Yeah. I agree with you, Stoney. I do believe
it used to be 31-0.
Right.
Now it's 72-0 because it's just, I mean, it's crazy. A lot of this, even Jimmy Hoffa gets involved in this.
Yeah.
Okay. Why would the mafia have turned against JFK? Well, we know about their involvement with the CIA, but Jimmy Hoffa might have been involved in Illinois with the union and the pollsters and things like that, helping JFK get elected.
Yeah, there was a lot of people that were a lot of people in the mob that were very upset with John F. Kennedy.
And you wonder why Jimmy Hoffa disappeared.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
He had his hands in a whole lot. And, what? So, I mean, for them to turn against him at one point in time when they're helping the country and helping JFK himself.
Yes, in a previously released April 1975 memo, the CIA downplayed what it knew about Oswald's visit to Mexico City before the assassination. The memo said the CIA recorded 3 phone calls between Oswald and a guard at the Soviet embassy, but only in the last one did Oswald identify himself. We are now discovering how much more the CIA and the FBI knew before the assassination about Oswald, Shannon said. And the question is, why didn't they act on that information in their own files? So that's what I'm saying. This brings up this idea. This is the questioning of these institutions. Are these institutions acting on the behalf of what they were intended to do?
Or do they have their own agenda?
Or they have their own agenda. And if I'm going to tell you, if they basically, through their inaction, they allowed a president to be assassinated, then, okay, that brings up, can that happen again?
That's the scary part.
That's the scary part, because if they can do this to undermine, in essence, the will of the people, then what kind of country do we have?
And that's why they didn't want these files out there.
That's why they didn't want these files released. So I think that's the most damning thing on this. I just think it's, hey, you may want to look at these people. What's going on. I mean, I think some of this stuff is coming out with, I think the CIA is probably benefited for a lot of that U.S. aid money. That's why people are raising 10 cans of hell when President Trump cut all that, because I got to, there goes our money.
Yeah.
And a lot
and the Gon can't spend $26,000 a month on sushi for employees that are working from home.
Yeah, I mean, it's just to me blows my mind with some of this stuff. But I go back. Eisenhower warned us about this whole apparatus that had gotten completely. It's now beyond the purview of the normal government to actually even contain it. It can't audit it. It can't. You can't find where they're spending money or any of these things, because it's all buried. And look, even some of these current senators and representatives. I recall they showed an interview where at the time Chuck Schumer was on an interview on one of the TV stations about, well, you don't want to get the intelligence agencies mad at you. Well, I wonder why.
There you go.
The question is, what sort of dirt they're gonna drag up on you, just like Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah.
I personally think the Israeli government was probably heavily involved in that operation.
Oh, he was a CIA asset. There's no doubt in anybody's mind he wasn't a CIA asset.
I do believe that there's things going on. This is how you get incriminating information on people, and use that to shape policy and to steer things in a certain direction.
Right.
So, I mean, I don't know.
Right.
I mean, it just, we'll see how this plays out over time. I'll be very curious what other files. I think have they released the Martin Luther King files? Has that been done yet, or is that coming?
Oh, that's all coming out. It's just not as.
It's not going to be as. I mean, we all know that in that particular case that the FBI was spying on.
Well, they thought he was a communist.
Yeah.
The reason they were spying on him was little less of the civil rights part, but that he was a communist.
Right.
So, that's a whole nother thing.
Yeah. That's a whole other thing. So, as I said, I think the biggest thing I've seen from this is just kind of, I hate to say it, but just reinforces my fears that we have an out of control
government,
out of control military industrial complex. Yep. That has, I think, in essence, are beyond the scope of of a democratically elected government now, and I don't know how you pull that back. I really don't. I mean, I know Trump is trying some things, but at the end of the day, he's only here for so long. It'll be somebody else.
There's a lot of things to do. Also,
there's a lot of other things to do
Yeah.
that you need to focus energy on, and you can't. You know, it's not like you're going to be there forever, even though as much as they're trying to push Trump to run a third time and all this talk and blah, blah, blah.
They're
blah.
just trying to distract you, and they're trying to get you to hate him for doing exactly what he said he was going to do.
Yeah. But see, that's what I'm saying. This is all part of these mind games.
Yep.
You know?
Man.
It's crazy.
Yes, it is.
Is there any kind of like actionable stuff they can do with some of that information, or is it all just kind of?
Well, there's nobody left alive to do anything to.
But I just was making sure that there's no like, I don't know.
I think it's just mostly for, I hate to use the word closure, but for the American people to know the truth finally.
Yeah,
I think that's the biggest part.
I mean,
that we're supposed to have a transparent government,
right? That's crazy. Yep.
You know, it's like that ding dong. What was it? Elizabeth Warren, Pocahontas, who said that the American people don't have a right to know how we spend their tax dollars. Yeah, we actually have a constitutional right, and you're supposed to give a accounting of it every year.
Right.
Actually, we do have a right. Ding dong.
Yeah, you know, it's funny.
And yes, you can quote me on that. Anybody who's listening, I called Elizabeth Warren ding dong and Pocahontas.
Well, it's so funny. You listen to some, you know, just how these politicians change over time.
Oh yeah.
You listen to her some very early speeches. She sounds completely different.
Yep.
And she has been bought and paid for, and she knows where her money's coming from. So you got to keep riding that train and keep it rolling.
Well, these politicians do the same thing all the time. Hillary Clinton, she was on the committee for Richard Nixon. I fired her because she was a liar, she was unethical, and a dishonest lawyer. She conspired to violate the Constitution, the rules of the House, the rules of the committee, and the rules of confidentiality. So when she was a baby, politician, she got fired from a committee because she was a liar. Well, we already knew that. But, Joe Biden, Sleepy Joe, lying, oh, I was at the top of my class. Oh, I have 3 degrees. And,
Yeah,
really?
Let's see here. I'm reading an ABC News article about this, and it said the previously redacted pages spell out specific instructions for CIA operatives on how to wiretap, including the use of certain chemicals to create markings on telephone devices that could only be seen by other spies under UV light.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, maybe we need to get them to release all of the files on the Richard Nixon Watergate stuff, because it was the CIA that planted the bugs in the first place. So, oh wait, that's on American soil. That was before they had the mafia involved, I guess.
Yeah, it said 179-page record contains 15 newly unredacted pages, though several of them remain unreadable due to the degraded quality of the typeface after many rounds of photocopy duplication.
Sketchy to me.
Yeah. So the newly disclosed portions of detail CIA surveillance of Soviet embassies in Mexico City and efforts to recruit double agents from Soviet agency personnel, and reveal the names and positions of those who were recruited. The CIA officials writing these memos tout the efficacy of their efforts, with one trumpeting, "I cannot help but feel that we are buying a great deal for our money in this project."
Well, the CIA got their money out of the mafia for sure.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, man. That's wild.
So
it's crazy how so many years later, I feel like I've heard about this my entire life, that like the conspiracies of it all and the back and forth of who done it and how many bullets there were, how many guns, how many the people that got injured in the process and all that stuff. And it's just crazy that now, so many years later, and now we're finally able to read a lot of the stuff about what's really going on behind the scenes.
Yeah, so the release does not include 2/3 of the promise files, nor any of the 500 plus IRS records, nor any of the 2,400 recently discovered FBI files. So, but regardless, it's step in a positive direction.
Yeah,
So there's still more out there, and I'm sure there's some things that we'll never find out.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I agree, 100%.
There'll be stuff that is buried deep, which is unfortunate.
Man.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean it's some interesting stuff here. It says, speaking of Watergate, one such document from August 1966 recommends a certificate of distinction for a CIA official who led the spy agency's technical division. Previous releases of the same document contain redactions, striking sentences that describe how this individual led a team that conceived and developed the use of fluoroscopic scanning and X-rays, which allowed the CIA to detect hidden technical listening devices for the first time. The official, James McCord, would go on to become head of security for Richard Nixon's re-election campaign in 1972 and gain infamy for his role as one of the Watergate burglars whose break-in precipitated the Watergate scandal of the 70s.
Man.
So that CIA director that JFK fired, Alan Dulles, he actually served on the Warren Commission.
Yeah. Really?
Yes.
Wow.
So they don't go far.
No.
They don't go far.
Never do.
That's crazy. So, yeah, we'll find out more as time goes on and as these researchers pour over these documents.
Because there's so many.
There's so many. It'll
take forever.
Thousands of documents you got to go through to try to pull out the relevant stuff. And
like I said earlier, I think a lot of it is, some of it, like, again, I think a lot of those documents are anything having to pertain to or was around or came in contact with it. So there's like a lot of things where like this person is a figure in this case, and then like some of their files got folded into it. So it's a lot of just like these random one-off documents that just kind of say things like, yes, sir, completed the task. And like, that's one whole document that's in there. So it's like, you have to kind of, there's a lot of like chaff you have to go through to like get probably to the good stuff. But you're right. They're going to be combing over this stuff probably for years now.
Yeah, so some of the other documents detailed operations to potentially overthrow Castro in Cuba.
Yeah.
According to a 1964 document, 2 intelligence assets to discuss potentially assassinating Castro under the administration of Lyndon Johnson. The CIA allegedly was formally in favor of such a plan. However, insomuch as Attorney General Robert Kennedy would have no part of it, it was shelved. Now the plan has allegedly been brought up again for consideration, the document said. Another previously released document detailed RFK being briefed on potential plans to kill Castro. RFK asked to be told before the CIA works with the mafia again.
Well, that's what I was saying earlier.
A footnote of the document read, some of the documents appear to have originated from the United States President's Commission on CIA Activities within the United States, also known as the Rockefeller Commission. In 1964 intelligence document, a station chief noted an interest in developing a source whose daughter is a secretary in RFK's Senate office. That document was released in 2018.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So yeah, it's a lot of stuff going on with this, and it's just in that time it was just the 60s where it was just it's a hotbed of of this kind of stuff. I mean, you're in the midst of the Cold War, fighting the communists,
And peace and love.
Yeah.
peace and love.
Yep.
So,
The first war that was televised.
Mm-hmm.
yep.
There was a lot going on.
We've talked about that a lot. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So,
Crazy.
The space race.
Yeah.
There was so
There
much
was so
going
much,
on.
yeah.
The 60s were.
we actually landed on the moon, because now some people say we didn't. It was all
Oh
it
gosh.
was
Here
all
we go.
fabricated. And it was all a PR deal
Yep.
to basically
The recent space shuttle that brought Katy Perry and all those
yeah,
people
Blue
up
Origin.
into space. Yeah, there's people now that are saying all that was fabricated and fake.
Well,
and
I
like
mean,
people
they're-
don't believe anything when it comes to space.
They can't make out. I mean, to me, that whole thing was such a.
It was a PR.
I mean, the
stunt,
idea that hey, we flew up in space and we came back down. Like okay, what'd you do?
Well, technically, if you cross the line, you went into space. And
Right,
they were
right.
there 11 minutes. Okay, you're still an
Right.
astronaut at that point. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I believe in that. But did they really go? That I don't know.
Well, and that's what people
Well,
are saying.
if they did, I don't care if they did or not. But to me, I guess once again, I mean, that's just it depends on how you view of what an astronaut is. Is it someone that's actually going there on a mission to accomplish something? Are you going to be doing tests?
Well, they did
Are you
accomplish
gonna be-
something. It was the first completely female crew that went into space. So they accomplished something.
Unfortunately, I don't think the PR thing worked as well as what they thought. So I think some of them kind of wish I would have never gone,
Right.
or just simply for what it is. When William Shatner went on it, what did he do?
Oh, yeah.
It was just simply to ride into space.
Yeah.
That's it. It was never made out to be, I'm an astronaut and all that.
Well, I
I
think-
just want to be out in space.
I think also
That's what
in,
it is.
In his case too, I think he came back unhappy, right?
Well,
Or he came back like feel like he had like an existential moment, I think. Which
I
didn't
mean,
help
like
that whole thing. Which
to
is
me,
understandable.
if any of us had the opportunity to actually fly in there to look down
Yeah.
and to see Earth,
Yeah.
to me, it has to affect you.
100%.
To
Sure.
think about,
We've heard that from actual astronauts.
it,
They say,
it changes your perspective on
yep,
everything.
right.
It's like it's my home,
Mhm.
and outside of that, it's nothing but darkness.
It sure looks small from here.
Yeah, I think that's what he was saying. He was like, he got this impending sin, or like, I don't want to put word. I don't remember the quote, but I remember it like him talking about the fact that he was like, once I got away from Earth and I was in space in some way, looking back at just how insignificant a lot of problems are, and I was
Right,
like, I can,
as I said, our perspective will change when we finally
oh, yeah.
officially make contact. I
Oh,
really do.
right.
And
And I think what recently happened with those people, in my personal opinion, I think they are already super disconnected from average people to begin with.
right.
So I don't think them going into space was. I think that they are just so disconnected, anyways, that I don't think it affected them. But that's just a personal thing. So
He said, I saw cold, dark, black emptiness. It was the death that I saw in space and the life force that I saw coming from the planet. My trip was supposed to be a celebration. Instead, it felt like a funeral.
see, that's what I'm saying.
William Shatner.
He, like I said, I remember he had like a whole moment where it was like,
It affected him.
yeah,
in a way.
right.
That's how it affected him.
And I feel like a normal person would probably have a very similar experience, whereas these people on the other end of the spectrum that I think are disconnected from average people or even just
Right.
humanity in general.
And that's why I think people were the public reaction to Shatner going into space
Yes.
versus what.
Well,
These-
Shatner was Captain Kirk.
Captain Kirk.
100%,
Okay,
yeah.
we've had ships named after the Enterprise
Yeah,
because of
Right.
Star Trek.
Yeah.
Right.
So
Yeah.
Right.
I could see why you would want to put him up
Right.
there.
Right.
To
Which
give
that-
him that opportunity,
Right.
because how many people did he inspire?
Mhm.
Right.
If I was in his position, I would take it as well.
Yes.
But like I think in the other end of the spectrum, you have, if I'm not mistaken, I don't remember all the ladies that were there, but I know it was Katy Perry. I think was it Bezos's wife? I think.
Yeah, I think so. I
So you
forget
have
too.
all these like I said, you have all these like larger than life people that yes, I think William Shatner was successful, but probably I don't think I don't know him personally, but I think he was probably more grounded than,
as I'm saying, I think the motivation,
yeah,
that him going up there versus
Crazy.
what these others were,
yeah.
I think it's different, and that's why I think it affected in a different way. But neither here nor there.
Interesting.
Maybe we can do a podcast on that.
Yeah, maybe. It's funny in life that as you become an adult, the hardest things in life are trying to find out what you're going to eat that day and coming up with a new podcast title.
Okay.
I mean,
It sounds like a very niche problem, but I get you.
Yes.
You're right.
Every day, Miranda and I, what we eating for dinner today?
Yeah.
Hey, what we doing for dinner today? Hey, what we doing for dinner today?
Some things never change.
Nope.
Yeah, that's okay. That's part of life.
I'm just thankful I got somebody to ask. Hey, what we doing for dinner today?
Hey,
It's been fun, guys.
Yes,
little-
this is
little things.
interesting. Wow.
Appreciate the people in your life.
Yes.
So anyways, we want to know what you guys think about all the things we talked about today. There's a whole lot of stuff that we talked about, a whole lot of things that happened, JFK stuff, the unfortunate passing of the Pope, this whole Katy Perry situation. So just if you have anything you want to talk to us about or any suggestions you want to give us.
Yeah, like what to cook for dinner
There you
tonight.
go. Yeah. Like what?
It's always a good thing.
Because by the time you're listening to this, it'll be a couple
That's right.
days.
It'll be a couple of days.
Yeah.
Yep.
So we have the email address, getoffendedtogether@gmail.com. We also have comment sections on Spotify and YouTube that you can comment to us there and all that kind of stuff. You can also check out our website.
Yep, retrospectpodcast.com.
Correct. And all those other things, make sure to subscribe and like where you can. We really appreciate you guys. And until next week, bye-bye.
Goodbye, everyone. God bless.
We've laid out the facts, newly declassified files, tangled motives, and decades of hidden agendas. The question now isn't who shot JFK, but really who stood to gain. We'll never move forward as a nation if we're too afraid to look backwards. So take this knowledge and do your own digging. Thanks for hanging out with us today. You're the best. Peace.